expectations and goals. Expectations and goals. Now, for me as a coach, something I've noticed is that this has become a huge issue the last 10 or so years in youth sports, more than ever before. And they've shifted from being goals about the goals and expectations of the kids and more about the goals and expectations of the parents. That's, for me, what I've really noticed about goals and expectations. It used to be a lot more about the kids, and now they seem to be a lot more about the parents. And one of the things I've noticed is that the fun can go out for a sports, for a youth athlete, especially a younger player in that kind of 12 to 15-year-old range, when it stops being fun, okay? And I hear a lot of kids say, I quit because it stopped being fun. And a lot of times it's because it's an external reason. It's not because they don't really love the game anymore. It's because it shifted at some point into like, hey, I need my son to get a scholarship. We need to win this game. You need to impress this college recruiter to please their parent. Like, it shifted from playing this game because it was really fun to do and be competitive to, we had to win this game. I had to please my parent. I had to perform for this D1 coach that was in the stands. And when these reasons for playing take over, the game becomes a chore, and next thing you know, it's become work, and burnout happens. So for me, when it comes to expectations and goals, that's one of the things that's been kind of an alarming thing that I have seen in the last few years. It's really, really important that you and your child have realistic expectations and goals about your child's development as an athlete. And don't confuse your expectations and desires with those of your child. Okay, there's a huge difference between the parents' expectations and goals and the kids 99.9% of the time. Okay? A lot of times parents complain that a child quit a sport too early. Maybe doing it because that's what the kid wants and not what the parent wants. Like, there's this huge disconnect there. So be very mindful of that and be always talking to your kids about that. To avoid what I'm just talking about, it's a great idea to set goals for kids, okay? Goal setting helps improve their motivation, their commitment, helps them stay focused. It helps them to assess their strengths and their weaknesses, and they can kind of track their performance. So for me, coaching college athletes a lot, we get the best out of them when we measure things, when we create goals, little goals here and there, not lofty, intangible goals, but little goals and little wins along the way. It really helps. So from a goal standpoint, are you talking to your kids about goals and what their goals are, not what your goals are? But who should do it? Like, who should set the goals? The parent, the athlete, the coach. In a perfect world, the athlete's setting the goals and the parents are supporting those goals. And they're working with the coach to do that. Especially if you're the travel ball age between like 13 and 16 years old, 17 years old. Talking to the coach about your goals, what you want to do, those things can be really powerful for the kid, parent, and working with the coach to do that. If a kid says, I really want to play D1 or I want to play in college, and those are the goals of the kid, not the parent, and the parent can figure out ways to support that and talk to the coach. Hey, this is what their goals are. Can you help us get those goals? When I was in high school, travel ball didn't really exist. My high school football coach was kind of that person that really helped me. And so when college football coaches started calling, he was the bridge between me and the college football coaches. And I remember the first time it was Navy. Navy was my first kind of big-time recruiting school. And my high school football coach is really, was kind of that go-between person at first about goals and, hey, is this what you want? All right, this coach is going to talk to you. And to me, that was really helpful for me. It didn't feel like I was on my island with myself or just my parents. And my high school football coach was really a big instrument in that. So, parents, you got to understand that you sometimes are the ones that are driving the goals and not the kids. So let's talk about what goals need to be established, okay? What goals need to be established and of what importance. So one, kids need to establish as they start getting, like I would say, 13, 14, 15, They need to establish long-term or dream goals. Like, what is your dream goal? I can tell you right now, since I was 5 years old, my dream goal was to be a Major League Baseball player. There was no other option. And my backup plan was astronaut. And if you grew up in the 70s and 80s, you knew that astronaut, it's such a different time now. We used to sit and watch everything. But I wanted to be an astronaut. And thirdly, I wanted to be a pro BMX bike rider. I don't know, those are the things that I wanted to be as a kid. But my long-term goal, my dream goal, was to be a Major League Baseball player, and that was really the one. And then you need to establish intermediate goals, like, okay, that's what you want to do. Maybe the long-term goal is to play in college. Well, what's the intermediate goal? Like, is it make your high school team? Is it make an elite travel ball team? What are the intermediate goals? And then what are the short-term goals? What do we need to do today? What do we need to do this week to start working towards those things? So, and then what are your immediate goals? Like, what are we going to get to work on this week? How do we get better this week? What are your goals for this week? And then we start talking about that. That's how we start talking about the process. We start talking about the process, and the process is really where the process goals, and goals surrounding the process, it just helps kids to stay grounded in the moment. It focuses them on what they're doing right then, and it starts to build confidence. But when our goals are so lofty and they're always long term or out the window, it's hard to see those things. It's hard to quantify them. But if our goals can be process oriented and immediate, it's just so much different. So short term goals and immediate goals, give them stepping stones, baby steps, to strive for and practice towards their long-term goals, which could be the big prize you're working for at the end of the season, at the end of a tournament. So for me, setting those short-term and immediate goals are really important, and they need to be driven by kids. So the young athletes, if you're listening, you can set practice goals, mental game goals, fitness goals, nutrition goals, things like getting more sleep. You know what? I'm going to make a goal that this week I'm going to sleep 9 hours every night. I'm going to make sure that I get my sleep. That can be an immediate goal. Or you know what? I'm going to start doing 10 push-ups a day. Next week I'm going to try to do 20 push-ups and just little goals like this, mental goals. You know what? When I strike out next game, if I strike out, I'm not going to walk back to the dugout and kick the wall or throw my helmet. I am going to, take little wins here. I'm not going to get frustrated. Whatever the things are. We always want to include an important, thing that, kids shouldn't overdo it. Okay. And when it comes to goals and it comes to expectations, one of the problems that you might have a kid like this, I was this way, perfectionists. Perfectionists set goals and then see them as a task. They got to master that task. So it's like, okay, this is my goal, and I'm just gonna check it off the box. For me, that's how I kind of operated. A lot of times I still do. Perfectionists kind of operate like they don't understand the process. Sometimes they just know, okay, this is what I need to do. I'm just gonna check off the box. And this leads to burnout a lot of times. This leads to burnout a lot. So, one of the things for me is setting those goals, getting the process. Don't be a perfectionist. And so the type of goals that end in defeat. Okay, so let's talk about the type of goals that end in defeat. And that's when we start getting from goals into expectations. So what sort of expectations should you avoid? Okay, let's talk about those. For starters, don't establish ability or outcome expectations. Okay, outcome and results, expectations and goals is not a good place to be. Stay away from those. When it comes to kids, ability expectations or outcome and result expectations, it helps. It's not good because expected to, basically because their natural ability. Like, we expect you to win because you're the best athlete out there. Okay, that's a little tough. Problem is that children can't control their own ability, especially at young ages, like 8, 9, 10 years old. Like, their body develops at different levels, and so they don't have fully control over their ability level. So we're all born with different abilities, different heights, different sizes, different skills, mentally, physically, emotionally. We can improve on those things, definitely, but you got to understand that each kid is built differently. And you might be on a team where a kid is an incredible athlete. Your kid's not as athletic. That's okay. But you can't have the same expectations of that. And so And result and outcome expectations got to be avoided. I can't tell you enough, parents, how many times I see that. And our hyper, we're in an achievement culture where we prioritize results over everything. Parents often expect their young athletes to produce. We expect you to win this game. I hear it from coaches too, but I hear parents say it a lot. I expect you to do this. I expect you to hit a home run today. I expect 2 goals out of you today. Whatever the expectation is, I've heard those from parents many, many times. We expect you guys to win this today. Okay, and so the problem here is that young athletes can't always control the outcomes, right? Referees, the other team, you can't control the outcome. You can only control what you can control. Even when they do their best, they might not win. Okay, even when they do their absolute best effort, they've done everything they can, they still might not win, right? They might still not have the best day ever. I tell our kids all the time, you might hit 4 hard line drives all the way to the fence, and the outfielder makes 4 unbelievable catches, and on paper you had a terrible day. You went 0 for 4, terrible day at the plate, but you hit the ball really, really well, and if it's just about the outcome, not the process, you would think that day is terrible. So, you can't start from there. The simple reality is that we all recognize that, results matter. Okay, so don't mishear me that results don't matter. They do matter, but when we make results and we make outcome the expectation, that's where we get in trouble. And we know, as a college coach, children are judged by the results. A lot of times children are judged by the results they produce. I've seen it from parents all the time. They're judged by the results. If you've ever been to a camp, a showcase, they got different times and different things they're measuring. Kids are being measured by their results, win or loss, their stats, whatever the thing is. And unfortunately, this focus can cause parents to place their desire for their children to succeed ahead of doing what's right for their child. So the parents start getting really all about the results, right? And because of the society we're in, we're measuring kids, it makes it about that. So, outcome expectations are often set for children without their buy-in. So let me be very clear on that. A lot of times, expectations are set for a kid without their buy-in, and that is a huge, huge problem. And what happens is kids feel like they're being dragged by the parent, kicking and screaming towards these expectations, right? And so parents, talk to your kids about those expectations. If your expectation is this and theirs isn't, all they're doing is trying to appease you, or they're not, and they're just like, hey, they're not bought into this expectation. They're not bought into this process. Only you are. That's a problem. And one goal can almost always end in success. So if you want your children to be successful, try establishing effort goals. Okay, let's talk about effort goals over which they have control. If your child feels like they have the tools to achieve their goals, so you've set these goals, and you're like, you know what, the kids got buy-in, they're more likely to embrace and pursue these things. And so if you make it about effort, make it about attitude, making sure they give 100% effort when they do things, it's so much different. So try this instead. Instead of saying, hey, I expect you to win, or I expect you to hit a home run this game, I expect you to make your best effort, and hold your kids accountable to that. If you can make your goals around effort, this makes it an entirely different thing, especially for the kids. And from a buy-in standpoint, it's way easy to get your kids buy-in if they only have to give their best effort, and I know that their parents aren't measuring them by their results. Okay, you can talk to your children about the value of effort. Okay, talk about effort, how it'll help them achieve their goals, and that they have complete control over their effort. So we talk about controlling the controllables. Kids have complete control over their effort. That's the only thing they really have control over, other than their attitude. So most importantly, you want to help them, and then you've got to help them understand that by giving their best effort, they're going to get their best result. There's got to be a connection there, because if it's just to make your best effort, that's great, but make that goal about effort and connect it to, hey, if you give your best effort, you might win the game today, or you might get the results that you were hoping to get. So it's about control. Kids want control. They want to feel like they're in control. And look, I have 5 kids, and my kids are always fighting for control. They want to feel like they have control over the situation. And if you can give them things that they can control, like attitude and effort and praise, and keep them accountable to those things, it makes it way easier. You got to remember, parents, that your passion a lot of times does not equal your kid's passion. Okay? I said, there are some kids like me. I was the most passionate kid about baseball ever. I could play in my backyard for hours and hours, and I was passionate. But not all kids are passionate about that. Coaches always feel the struggle. Like, as a coach, I'm way more passionate than my players are about a certain thing. And so, be really careful about how you do that. Okay, and so. Make sure your passion is equal to theirs. You don't have to, you can encourage your kid. You can try to get them passionate. You can create an environment for them to be passionate about, but if it's just your passion and not theirs, that's a big, big problem. And then from an expectations and a goal standpoint, avoid the mindset that more is better. Okay? More is not always better. When it comes to practice, just because they put in 3 hours of practice on the day doesn't mean that more is better. Okay, quality over quantity is a thing. So make sure that it's not just a saying, it's not just a cliche. It really is a thing. Quality over quantity, and you got to find that good balance. There's a fine line between gently encouraging and creating a good environment for your kids, and versus you forcing them to practice. If you're forcing them to practice, we talked about this before. That's a trouble area, and something that I want to talk to parents about at some point. Is like, hey, if your kid doesn't really want to play and you're forcing them to do it, it might not be the best thing for them. And the more practice, 7 days a week, we're doing this. It leads to burnout. It leads to overuse, injuries. You got to remember that parents often forget that children do not have unlimited capacity for physical exercise. They get tired just like we do, not as quickly and not as fast sometimes, but they get tired too. And they may not be physically able to handle a lot of extra practice, a lot of extra conditioning. So be smart about that. And then one of the biggest things that I can help you guys with, that I want you guys to really listen in this morning, is don't fall into the comparison trap. Okay? To me, that's one of the biggest problems that I see right now out in the country as a recruiter, as a coach, as a parent. The comparison trap when it comes to expectations. There are always going to be kids ahead of or behind your kid. Okay, on your team, on the field, in your town. It's not about how your kid is doing against friends or a sibling. I see sibling comparisons a lot. An older player, a star athlete. These things are not important. Do not fall into the comparison trap. She's not your son or daughter is not competing against anyone but themselves. The goal is to develop the best version of your son or daughter, to develop their full potential of just them, not to beat some other athlete on their team, in their town, in this tournament or the showcase of the camp. The goal is for your child to compete against themselves, to be the best version of themselves. So we've got to balance expectations and goals for age, and it's got to be age appropriate, right? The goals for the first couple of years of playing, like t-ball, and we're starting to play 5, 6, 7 year olds. The goal is fun. That's the only goal. That's the only expectation, is get them to fall in love with the game. Practices are about fun. We want them to have a fun experience. It should be all about there. There's no pressure to perform. They're learning, they're growing, they're socializing with teammates, they're learning life lessons about being a team player, learning how to share. It's all about fun, encouragement. That's really about it. And then as they get older, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, we start to bridge some of that stuff. We start to teach them life lessons about being a healthy lifestyle, and start to practice a little bit more technical stuff. We start seeing players start getting a little bit more talented, or a little more, just a little bit better. And so as parents and coaches in that next level, the 8 to 11 years old level, we're starting to introduce, some more competitive type stuff. And as they get older, 12, 13, 14 years old, the player starts getting self-motivated. You get to start seeing, wow, my kid's starting to really love this sport or a different sport, and they're starting to get those juices flowing. Competitive juices are flowing. Coaches are getting a little more competitive. The parents are getting a little more competitive. But fun is still a theme there, and we're trying to we want to keep that fun part really good. So, fun and unconditional love from parents are still really important there, but maybe we're starting to get a little bit more encouragement about practicing harder, about effort goals. We're talking more about effort goals in there. So, to me, that's one of the things we start introducing at that age. So, for me, I guess for me, some of the best advice I can give to you guys is if you want more success in sports and life, drop expectations. Expectations, get rid of them. Focus on goals, focus on effort, focus on the things that you control. If curiosity killed the cat, they say, expectations killed the athletes. It really stresses out athletes. I've seen so many stressed out athletes because of these expectations. And there's such a big difference between goals and expectation. Goals are aspirational. We're working towards them. They're achievable. They're things that we've set right in front of us. Immediate goals, intermediate goals, long-term goals. Expectations are what we internalize and believe we should achieve, or we believe our kids should achieve them. When we don't achieve them, all of a sudden our expectations, they fall. We always fall short of expectations, and expectations for our kids makes things really difficult. Athletes often have ambitious goals and unrealistic expectations, so it's important to have goals. For me, I had unrealistic expectations of playing Major League Baseball. I just wasn't that good. I was probably a good Division II player, maybe a small Division I baseball player. For football, it was a better sport for me. Again, I was probably a bench player on a D1 football team, and my goals of playing Major League Baseball just wasn't that good. Could I have worked harder and gotten there? Maybe, but I should have had smaller goals, better goals along the way. It's counterproductive to have unrealistic expectations. Unrealistic expectations lead to disappointment, they lead to anger, they lead to frustration, they lead to battles with parents and kids all the time, whether or not they're external, they're internal battles. So, list your expectations. Understand that, here's the thing. The last hitter in Major Leagues to hit over 400 is Ted Williams. The last hitter to hit in the Major Leagues over 400 was Ted Williams. He did that in 1941, almost 80 years ago. Okay, so if your kid's expectation is to hit 400 in the Major Leagues, it's happened one time in the last 80 years by Ted Williams, one person in the entire planet. So that probably is not a great expectation. Wilt Chamberlain holds the highest field goal percentage in a single season with 72%. That means he missed almost 30% of his shots, and it's still the highest record of all time. And I've said this story many times too. The all-time leaders for strikeouts of all time in baseball, from a hitting standpoint, the all-time leaders in strikeouts, the top 20 list includes Reggie Jackson, Sammy Sosa, A-Rod, and Derek Jeter. Okay, those are four of the names in the top 15 or 20 in the all-time list for most strikeouts. Okay, they failed a lot. So, what's the answer? Play with no expectations. High confidence, high focus on the process and not the outcome. High focus on the process and not the outcome. Play with no expectations, but play with goals. No expectations. None. Drop them. Parents, I know that's really, really hard for you to do. It's really hard for parents to drop expectations, so much more than kids. You have years and years of thinking and expecting lots of yourself, and so then you transfer that on your kids, right? And to make the change, you've got to first acknowledge, what are your expectations? So list them out. As a parent, I encourage you, at the end of today, make a text message to yourself, write it down, list what your expectations really are. List them all out. And you're going to see that all of your expectations, most of them, are outcome-based. Okay? They're results-based. They're outcome-based. They're not actual realistic goals sometimes. So once you drop the expectations, take that list and try to find ways to make it into goals, process goals. You're going to see it's much different, especially if you're a kid. So when we focus on process, on execution, on doing the small things correctly, the outcome will come. Parents can fuel the athlete's expectation cycle. Think about the questions you may ask after an athletic event. So, we talk about the ride home from the game. It should be about, I love to watch you play. Let's get some ice cream. But when things have all settled down, you might say, hey, these are the questions you want to stay away from. Did you guys win? Did you score? What was your time? Did you start? How much playing time did you get? All of those things the kids have no control over. The score of the game, what their playing time was. Don't make the conversation around outcome and results. Okay. The better conversation is, did you play your best? Did you give your 100% effort? Did you have fun? Those are the conversations you need to have, and it's really hard for parents to have those conversations. We want our kids to have success on the field, and so we go straight to those things. And so, were you a good sport? Did you have good sportsmanship? Did you play your hardest? Those are the things we want to see, and we don't want to stress out our kids about expectations, and we ruin their journey of sports. There's just so many, sports has just so many beautiful moments. It has so many life lessons in it, and I don't want to ruin it. To me, it gives us stress, anxiety. Athletes are trying to live up to their parents' expectations. Too many disappointments and frustrations are usually a sign of too many expectations. So if you feel like you or your child has had a lot of disappointments or a lot of frustration around the game they're playing, this is usually a sign of too many expectations. Let go of expectations. Let go of your attachment to outcomes. Let go of your attachment to outcomes. Fall in love with the process, and I promise you the results will come.